Hey, Badrina, are you there? Hello, sir. It says connecting to audio.
Hello,
Bad-
sir. How are you?
Badrino, what is going on? Badrino, everyone. Famous Canadian political commentator Badrino joining us. Welcome. What's going on, man?
Not much. I think I'm just about as depressed as you are right now, to be
Yeah,
honest, with the results.
yeah. None of this is good. So what was your like election situation last night? What were you watching it? You were streaming. You streamed the election, right?
Yeah, I did.
So how did it go for you?
It went well. I'm still getting used to Twitch and stuff, but I thought it went pretty well. The I think my favorite part is when CBC was showing the mail-in ballots and just how many like bins and bins full of mail-in ballots they had.
Okay. Well, what should Badrino like? What are we doing? What are we doing here? I don't know. It's like I feel like kind of at a loss here. I don't even really know what we're supposed to, how we're supposed to progress. I don't know if people caught the on the breach stream last night. Drew OJJ at the end of the night had some inspiring words about how there's an opportunity. There's certainly an opportunity for like the left to make headway um, in this new government, but it seems no one seems interested in actually doing that. No one from like in the last 5 years of the NDP history don't really instill me with a ton of confidence that they're going to be like, okay, now's the time that we're really going to start taking it to them. Like it's just not happening. I don't know what we're supposed to take away from this.
Yeah, exactly. And with especially with Jagmeet Singh, like when it comes to concessions from the Liberal government, he didn't really mention anything in his speech. So like the only really good thing that could come out of this is maybe he uses pharmacare as leverage or he uses something as leverage, but he didn't even really mention anything like that in his speech. So that to me, that's a bad sign. I don't really think he's going to push Trudeau that hard to say it's like either you give us pharmacare or we're not supporting you at all.
Yeah. Um, Trudeau also talked about electoral reform again. Like he gave like a little nod to maybe looking at that again. Um, you know, but that's not like who's going to hold him accountable for that? Obviously, he has no interest in doing that, or he would have done it already. That's one thing that the NDP could like put the pressure on, right? Like they could say, if you want to pass anything, commit to this. You got to commit to this. Are they willing to make these like bold moves, or are they just content to just keep the status quo the way it is? It seems like it's the latter sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the only silver lining I really saw last night was Blake getting elected with the NDP because I think he will be at least a more left-ish voice. But besides that, especially when you mentioned earlier with foreign policy, I mean, I definitely don't think the NDP is going to be putting any kind of like pressure on the Liberals to change their foreign policy. So I think overall, the one of the most upsetting things about this is it just feels like everything's staying the same. It feels like this
Yeah,
pandemic will never end. It feels like the parties, everything is just going to stay the same for another 2, 3 years. And I think a lot of people are really disappointed with that.
yeah. I mean, this is what I kept saying it last night, but worth reiterating, right? Like we're not dealing with like these abstract issues. We're not dealing with these abstract little things that we're like, oh, we should maybe tweak this little tax code system or make these little apply these little band-aids. It's like we're dealing with these broad systemic crises. Um, like Trudeau's been talking about emissions, and he's still kind of walking around with the holding this idea that by 2030 we're gonna have this drastic reduction of our emissions. That's 8 years from now. Like that's really soon. We don't even know like what the government's gonna be in that time as well. It's like it's fucking incredible. Um, that these are our conversations. It's so inane.
Yeah, and especially with me, like especially with the pandemic, the fact that that really took the backseat in this election, that in the debates, in the election discourse, no one really seemed to care about the pandemic. No one seemed to care that like morgues in Edmonton are full right now. And it's just such a disconnect, I think, between everyday people and what we're experiencing right now and what these politicians are doing, trying to get elected and talking about their platforms and stuff. But the fact is like there's still restrictions on our everyday lives. We're still in the middle of a pandemic that's getting worse, and it just feels like they're incredibly more disconnected than usual with everyday people.
Yeah. Um. Well, Badrino, like, what would you like if you had to? What's the issue that's like most like pressing to you that is being ignored right now? Because I know like you talk a lot about your own like economic circumstances, and a lot of the commentary you do, you talk specifically about how you specifically are being left behind, by this economic system, right? Like, what can you talk a little bit about that, about your own circumstances and like how they're not being addressed, by this process?
Yeah, for sure. So like I obviously come from like a poor background, and I know a lot of people who are still struggling and things like that. And I think this election, when we look at things like housing, just how bad all the parties' platforms were, especially the NDP, it was really underwhelming. The only platform that I liked for housing was the Communist parties. I thought there's actually addressed the the housing crisis. Um, so housing's a really big thing because so many people I know, you're just paying so much money to rent to live somewhere where it's not a good place to live, and you're putting half of your paycheck into rent every month. And none of these parties really care. All of these parties have landlords, in their ranks, as in their establishment as MPs and stuff like that. And it's really disappointing to see that. I think the other big thing too is just people living on disability. Um, Trudeau tried to come up with that Canada Disability Benefit promise to do 3 years of study. But it's really unfortunate because I know so many people who are disabled living off of $1,000 per month. They can't get by. They don't have any hope for the future. And especially with things like MAID, the government expanding access to medically assisted, like dying, some of those people, I mean, people are going to end up choosing that way out instead of living in deep poverty, living off of $1,000 a month. So I think economically, those kind of things like housing, people on disability, medication, pharmacare, the amount of people I know, even if you have government coverage, a lot of medications aren't covered. I know someone with cystic fibrosis, not everything's covered, like oxygen tanks. It's just really disappointing. I know so many people who are struggling to get by. And unfortunately, this election just, even if the NDP got into power, a lot of these problems would still exist. It might help a little bit, but in terms of housing, in terms of a lot of these problems, unfortunately, these parties just don't have an answer to fix these problems and
Yeah.
the suffering that is going on.
Yeah, I mean I tried to make that point last night when we were talking about these smaller parties like the Communist Party, and we've heard a lot about how they've grown over the last couple of years, but that wasn't really reflected last night in any way. Like, it's pretty much that they're pretty much still a total non-factor electorally, and it's easy to kind of like dismiss that. But I think what you said is valuable, and I tried to make this case last night. Whereas, like, I think it would be really valuable for all of us, even people that don't really identify with the Communist Party or they don't call themselves like specific Marxist Leninists or whatever. It would be really valuable to our discourse if we just like took their platform and included it when we have these discussions, and we don't just like limit our discourse to like the NDP, and anything further than that is basically like not like up for discussion. Like, the thing that kept on coming up last night, it comes up every single time we have these conversations, is that we're dealing with these level of crises. Housing is one. The environment, indigenous communities, opioid crisis, like in the crisis of capitalism, the crisis of imperialism. We all talk about how the NDP is not doing enough to like talk about these things, or take these things seriously. And that's the thing. And when you look at the Communist Party platform, they're actually treating these issues like it's serious crises that they are, and proposing like radical solutions to deal with them instead of just these sort of watered down, more liberal plans. And that's why I think it's important that, like, regardless of whether you like the Communist Party or not, I feel like it would be good. It would be good for our discourse if we at least like took a strong look at their platform and talked about it. Like I was saying earlier in the stream, there's one party that's out there saying capitalism is the problem. There's one party that's doing this. I would love for the NDP to do it, but they're not. The farthest they're willing to go is like, Oh, we need to tax the ultra wealthy. And there's one party that's saying capitalism is the problem. And if you agree with that, it's like we should probably be like taking that seriously and taking a look at their platform at least, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing with the Communist Party to me is like everything they propose is the government can do. Like they're not proposing these unrealistic like policy proposals that could never happen. All of the policies that they introduce are ones that you can actually do, like defunding the RCMP or building a
Abolishing
million
it. They want to
affordable,
just abolish the RCMP and
yeah.
CSIS,
Like
which is
you can
that's
do that.
good. Yeah, let's do it. We should be talking about that. Yeah. Um.
Yeah, exactly. So like
Yeah.
it's interesting in that sense because it's like I know some people try to say, "Oh, well that's not possible in our system." But it is. Like all everything pretty much everything they propose is 100% doable in our current government system. So I find that frustrating when people try to act like they're this far off party that's like proposing these ridiculous proposals. This could actually get done if there was a movement behind it.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. No, I know. It's so it's just like just a sense of like frustration. Um. I don't know, Badrino. I don't know what we're doing, honestly. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Um, and it just looks like we're heading now into like another election cycle. It's just, I just see, there's just, it just seems like we're like, we're treading water here. We're treading water. Like we talked about endlessly as well last night. Like the best case scenario last night was like that we would end up in the same position we were in where we started, where none of these issues are really seriously being addressed. And we could say like, okay, I guess it's good that now we're not like actively making these problems worse, but like that still doesn't leave us in a very good position.
Exactly. And like the only good thing I could really see coming out of this is if the NDP kind of coalesces around a movement, whether it's pharmacare, whether it's just like one thing, and they make that a conditional support of like the liberal governments. If the NDP says we're not going to vote for you unless you pass some form of pharmacare, that's the only way I could really see there being like any kind of real net gain. And that's the thing; they could only probably get like one concession in that sense
Yeah.
because the NDP doesn't have that many seats. So like one concession maybe
Yeah.
would be the best case scenario.
And as people have pointed out in the chat too, it's like they're like the liberals don't even have to work with the NDP. Like they'd probably much rather work with other parties, like work with the conservatives and the bloc to do this stuff. It's like it's in their best interest to freeze out the NDP as much as possible. And also that's the other thing is that like that strategy sounds nice, but there's been a historic 6-year opportunity to do just this. Not even 6 years because like we had a majority for a little while, but the last 3-4 years, like there's been plenty of opportunities to play hardball like this. So it's a nice idea to be like, well, now maybe they will, but it's like it feels a little bit like that thing of Lucy holding the football because it's just like we're still just waiting around. It's been if people are on the left in Canada that are even if you can believe it older than me that have been around this for a while, it's been 20 years of having this conversation now. Maybe now they're gonna do these they're gonna adopt these radical policies. Maybe now they're gonna like really play hardball, and it's like it's how much longer can people tell this to themselves and like comfort themselves in this idea that like eventually the good things are going to happen out of this process. It's like it starts to feel it makes you feel insane after a certain point, after it's been literally decades of making these kinds of arguments.
Exactly. And like even for me, like I first got into politics when like Kretschmann was prime minister. I was very young when I got into politics, but like nothing's changed since then. Like it gets so tiring seeing just the same stuff happen over and over again and the same talking points happen. And like you said, the liberals, they will play hardball. They also might just call another election in like 6 months or something.
Oh God.
Like they might, as that's the thing I mentioned yesterday is like, if they start polling above 170 reliably again, they're just going to call another election whenever that may be.
Oh
so
God.
I'm not looking forward to that.
Don't even put that out into the universe, Padrino. That's like dangerous. That's dangerous ideas you're getting out there. I do not want to have to go through that again. Let's see. Let's hear from the chat. What else we got going in the chat? Lydian's talking about the disabled population shouldn't feel the brunt of this bullshit. They always do. It's only getting worse for them. Canary in the coal mine. Well, there's no hope for everyone in a doomerish way. It's already been there for a while, living below the poverty line. That is a good point. I mean, a lot of that stuff, like Lodan, that's really important to point out, is that a lot of this sense of these collapsing institutions that people are feeling, like this has been the reality for people for a long time. And I think the issue is that it's more and more people are falling out of that kind of fake middle class that was propped up for many decades. And now more and more people are being left behind as these crises continue to intensify. And then we have this idea that like, oh, everything's collapsing now, but there's a whole class of people that have been living this now for fucking decades, which is true.
I do not approve of that Chrystia Freeland majority. Please, please don't will that into existence
No.
either. Chatter.
Jesus Christ. I mean, it's just, that's it. It's like the immediate political future here. It's really alarming to think about this kind of stuff. It doesn't seem like, even though Trudeau, I think his credibility kind of took a hit in this election. Doesn't seem like he's ready to go anywhere anytime soon. But it's only a matter of time until we do have woke girl boss Chrystia Freeland taking over the reins, and that's just like even more depressing.
I have heard from some like people who work for the Liberal Party that I've spoken to off the record that like Mark Carney really wants to lead the Liberals. So that also might be another direction they'll go, is like the Mark Carney, like woke economist route. That would be cringy as well, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Oh God. So I'm just communicating with a few more people that are responding to the Rob signal. Do you have any other thoughts? You got to carry us through this segment while we wait for more people to show up, Madrino. What else? Sure. Let me hear some more analysis. What else do you have for me?
Well, I do think
put you Canadians... on the spot. It's up to you. You have to carry us through this moment.
I do think Canadians are upset with Trudeau to some degree because it does look like a smaller portion of people voted for him. It looks like voter turnout was way down as well. So I do think people are kind of getting sick of him. And every Liberal politician does have an expiry date eventually, whether it's Chrétien, Trudeau Sr., whoever it may be. So I do think Trudeau is inching closer to his expiry date of how many more scandals can he get away with. I guess the one thing I could look at is like in 2015, when I was young, so many people I knew voted for Trudeau. And that has really changed. Trudeau has lost so much support among young people, and he's relying on support from older people now.
Yeah. Well, this is what we talked about a lot last night. It's like the Martin Lukács, who hosted the Breach broadcast. He's talked about this endlessly. He literally wrote the book on this Trudeau formula, and we talked about it a lot last night. How it's completely worn off. It's really difficult to kind of make this case. Like pointing out 2015 it's amazing to even think that he in 2015 he really was the candidate, like it or not, that had that like progressive youthful energy, and that came across as an outsider. It's like, it's amazing that that anyone bought this. I know personally for myself, I mean, I was basically a single issue voter in 2015, which was for electoral reform. It had been 10 years of no one make fun of me for being a liberal. Okay, I'm not a liberal, and it's actually slanderous to make these kind of claims and possibly legally actionable. So maybe let's hold back on that. I was basically a single issue voter in 2015. Trudeau promised electoral reform. There had been 10 years of Stephen Harper, a really terrible austerity, climate change denying Stephen Harper government. And Trudeau was the one in that campaign that legitimately presented himself as like the most kind of progressive left-wing candidate against Mulcair, who completely fucked up that whole election, and it was an absolutely awful campaign, and he completely blew his opportunity to win that, which was like a strong possibility at the beginning of the campaign. And I really thought, oh God, there's already clips showing up in the chat of this. And that's the thing, it's like Trudeau was so clear about the electoral reform stuff. Like, he couldn't have been more clear about this. And I thought, I hate the way our democracy works, our fake democracy. I don't want to have to vote strategically anymore. I would like to have some kind of proportional representation. Trudeau seemed very serious about this. And that was the thing. That was my one experience. The one time I thought I could trust the liberals, despite the lesson that we all need to understand about liberals and liberalism, is that you don't trust them. In 2015, I was like, all right, I'm going to put my trust. I'm going to put my trust in the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau. And if they only pass this electoral reform, well, then it's going to be a good thing. I mean, that'll justify everything. And then they immediately just completely ditched that idea. And now you have Trudeau saying like, oh yeah, maybe we'll look at that again. And it's like, no, they're not going to look at shit. We're stuck like this. We're stuck in this system. Again, not a liberal though. Let's not make any claims, any kind of extreme claims about that. It would be very unfortunate.
Why I Left the Liberals by Rob Rousseau.
Oh no. Oh my god. Yeah, Washington Post journalist Dave Weigel called me Rob Trudeau actually the other day, which was upsetting. I was not happy about this. It was really, I believe it was the only time in my life. I don't want to say it was the only time. I believe it was the only time I've ever voted for the Liberal Party in my lifetime. And I do not recommend it. Would not do it again.
I can see that. Like, chat can like roast you, but the truth is, a lot of people I know voted for Trudeau. Pretty much almost everyone I knew. Like, I was a political science student at the time, first year. So pretty much everyone in my class, all my friends, almost everyone I knew voted for Trudeau. It was just so different. I think some chatters, especially if you're younger, you might not see what it was like back then, but like Harper really was this figure that people wanted to get out of power.
Yes.
And Trudeau really presented himself kind of like an Obama type person, like the change candidate. And things were really different back then. Whereas if you weren't into politics back in 2015 and you're looking at it from now, it's a really different perspective. Things have changed so much. But back then, people were putting like on stop signs, it would say stop Harper. Like there was this huge resistance against Harper. And that really just kind of coalesced around Justin Trudeau.
Yeah. And yeah, to the left of the NDP leader. That's right. That's how fucking grim it is. And again, now I'm going to give credit to Trudeau again. People are going to roast me even more now. To his credit, though, you talked about him, how he's this Obama-like figure. And the reality is, like, we may not like him. He is really good at that, though. He's really, really good at presenting himself as that exact kind of image. And obviously the shine has worn off on that. We all see through it now. But, like, when he was kind of still a fresh face, and it was coming up from this decade of Stephen Harper's conservative government, it was easy to believe that, I think. And he's very, very good at playing that part. And I never fully trusted him. I don't want to say like I really bought the hype, but he is very, very good. Like when he was able to like present himself that way. I mean, that's why he's still in power, because he does have some ability to come across as kind of authentic and inspiring and progressive. Like he's really good at it. And it makes, when you realize, like, especially watching the debate, it's basically this like sociopathic, politician thing where they can just look you directly in the eye and just lie through their fucking teeth. But if you're like a normal human being, you don't view people like that. You're like, oh, this guy seems pretty all right. He's really good at that shit. I mean, he's a politician. You can tell he comes from a political dynasty.
Oh yeah, and like when I was in university, Trudeau visited, and like it was like the Beatles were there. Like girls were just screaming. There was a girl beside me. She just screamed like "Daddy" as Trudeau walked by. Like it was a different time.
It was certainly a different time, and we no longer think of him as Daddy. That is true. Not me or anyone else thinks that. Lana, are you with us? We got Lana Polanski, the Freak Museum herself, joining the stream. I think just the voice. Just via the voice of God. I see Lana in there. I don't see a microphone symbol next to Lana's name. So I feel like Lana is possibly not connected to the microphone. I'm sure she'll join us eventually. Oh, fuck, what am I doing?
I'm in. What's up?
She's in. What's up, Lana?
I just woke up like a
Okay.
half an hour ago. I'm having a coffee and
Very
some
nice.
dad's cookies. Got the big box from Costco going
Very nice.
on.
Cool.
I've a carefully curated little bubble to keep out the bad vibes.
Yeah. Well, same here. I would have really liked to sleep in today. I went to sleep at like 3. I had to wake up at 8 a.m. to do like my dad's stuff. And my brain just feels like pudding now after the whole live stream last night. I've done so much live streaming over the last 5 days. I'm like really looking forward to not doing this anymore,
You're a
frankly.
workhorse.
Yeah, I know. That's how much I care in doing politics, which is what this is. This is what this is.
I
Solana, what?
respect that.
Yeah,
Yeah, go
thank
ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
Well, Solana, like, I don't want to bring you on this program to talk about do like electoral politics, election breakdown analysis. I think we're kind of
Mhm.
past that. But I feel like I suspect you might have some rants about what's going on. And I'd be
I'm always
interested to
a
hear just
little
your overall thoughts and like where we're at now.
I am always a little baffled and bemused when people want my political opinions about things because I must insist once again that I am a gamer. Uh, that's a fact. I'm not exaggerating. It is what I do for money. Play video games on the internet.
I'm a
That's
gamer as
a
well.
lot of it. So,
I mean, that's the thing,
um,
Lana. Like, I was on a stream last night. I was on a panel with like all these like amazing activists and journalists and authors, and I'm like some failed musician. Like, I'm not qualified to be here in any way. But it's
yeah,
like
I mean,
whatever.
it's like I don't like listen. This isn't like a list of credentials, but like I have some involvement in like local organizing. So on that level, I do some stuff with labor organizing. I'm a member of Game Workers Unite. Um, and I've done streams for them a couple times, and I'm involved in some local housing stuff and what have you. So you can like really see if you are involved in that on any level. You don't have to be a political expert of any kind. You just have to be just a little bit involved to see the divide between electoral politics and this sort of theatrical performance and the actual on the ground issues that people are dealing with. And it's nothing complicated. It's nothing that you need an advanced degree in political science to figure out. It's all very straightforward stuff.
Yeah.
People are like on my street, there are rent evictions happening all the time. We have like I live in one of the only ridings with NDP MP incumbent that actually won again. And I felt so safe in that I ended up voting for the Marxist-Leninist Party because it was the only party with a candidate on the ballot that I could vote for that was even remotely close to anything I wanted.
Hey, we're both Albanian Communist Party sympathizers now.
Yeah, we're
That's my
both
new
Hajit.
thing.
Yeah, get in the bunker. Um, so
I've always said that Albanian socialism is the purest form of socialism. I'm often saying this.
I mean, listen, that's a whole other discussion. The weird split between like CPC and CPCML, it's so infuriating and weird. And
Yeah.
I just wish they would kiss and make up.
Yeah,
It's been
I
long
think
enough.
I think
But
I think whatever the split was in the '90s about some obscure political thing, like maybe it's time
yeah,
to figure out the differences now and just kind of get on the same page. Maybe.
you've you've all had your fun accusing each other of being revisionist.
Yeah.
Let it
Okay.
go.
There we go. Yeah.
Um, um, but like like get your shit together and get your like collective 40 candidates together and do something about it. But like my NDP MP, he's a landlord, right? Um, so he's not the only NDP landlord. There are CISA spooks in that party as well. But all that is to say, like I see rent evictions happening on my street, right? I see there is a growing home. I live in an area that has like a shopping plaza, but it's relatively residential, and I see the homeless crisis has been increasing gradually over time, like over the few years that I've lived here. I like you can tell what's happening. It is so weird to talk to people who live in sort of like safe little enclaves, kind of like in the suburbs, and they're concerned about completely made up shit. Like they think that I'm gonna get shot or something. Like they think the gun violence, like they're listening to like the police on the news telling them the gun violence is out of control. And I'm trying to tell them, listen, like the violence that I see every single day is property developers building on land that was supposed to be reserved for social housing to build condos, and people are becoming homeless, and the cops are getting more and more money to destroy their encampments, and like this is a real on the ground crisis.
Yeah.
It's a serious problem. And I could go into some of the more like specifics of like the things landlords have done within the last couple of years during the pandemic to up the vacancy rate.
Yeah, please. I mean, this is the thing.
Fraudulent renovation.
Yeah, please do. I mean, this is the thing we were talking about the other day, though, when Trudeau was getting like a handful of gravel thrown at them, and then we have all our like political leaders hand wringing over it, being like, we can't have political violence. No one supports political violence, but no one ever makes this connection where these rent evictions, that's political violence.
That's
taking
political
away
violence.
You know, upward transfer of wealth in the middle of a pandemic where working people are fucking dying every day. That's political violence as well. Like this is the political violence that's baked into our system that we all accept. And then when someone throws a fucking pebble at our prime minister, then that's the thing we all have to like cry about.
Yeah, no, I at first when I found out that had happened, before I knew what they were even mad about, because I know that particular incident was just a bunch of pranks or whatever.
Yeah,
it
of course.
Like PPC pranks, I think.
Yeah.
But still, like in my mind, like the first time I heard that, I'm like, wow, people are genuinely really mad at Trudeau. And of course, I, being a reasonable person, going, oh, there are all these like various reasons that, like there are all these ways he's failed, or his party has failed.
Yeah.
Or the provincial parties have failed, and people are like rightfully really upset. Whether it's pharmacare, whether it's housing, whether it's the climate, whatever, there's all of this stuff, whether it's electoral reform, there's all of these things that he like promised he would do that it hasn't happened, or it's gotten worse.
Yeah. No, but they're throwing gravel because they think that he's like a child trafficking communist funded by George Soros or whatever.
Yeah, sure. Like, but like, and we can get into the PPC stuff too, because I have like my gripes and suspicions about them as well. But yeah, like having seen that, and then having seen that, it was just this like really dumb, exaggerated media op. It felt like watching pro wrestling.
Yeah,
that was where the heels were the PPC. And Trudeau's positioning himself as like the face, this poor beleaguered politician who's just trying to do right by everybody.
Yeah.
And these unreasonable, and it becomes like a way of conflating all anger, all political anger, and all protest with those fucking freaks, which I think is part of the reason for their continued existence and why they're getting so much airtime.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, there was in like 2019, like we had a historically low, or like in 2020 rather, when the pandemic just kind of started, we had like a historically low vacancy rate, because nobody wanted to move, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. And then and before the relief benefits started to come in, which you can kind of thank the NDP for some of that for sure. Like people were losing their jobs and falling behind on rent. And also, this was, I think, the bigger issue on top of that was the fact that landlords basically started really aggressivly filing for evictions, whether it was for lapsed rent or just for completely fraudulent reasons. And really high proportion of rent evictions are like something like 80%. Are connected with like fraudulent eviction notices. Like it's a really high number. The Comité de Logement de Rosemont, which is like the housing committee for the borough that I live in, they actually conducted a study of something like 800 eviction cases, and they found like the overwhelming majority of them were technically fraudulent.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people often talk about like, hey, my landlord did this. Like, is that legal? Like, I don't think that's legal.
Yeah.
And people will say like, oh shit, yeah, that's not legal. And it's like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do about that? It seems like crime is legal for these landlords. By the way, Lana, just before we continue, I just wanted to welcome Jeremy Appel. He joined. He answered the Rob signal. Welcome, Jeremy. Thanks for joining us on the stream as well.
Oh no, great to be here. You know, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit hungover.
Yeah.
Both from alcohol, but also, you know, election psychosis.
Yeah, I'm hungover with election fever, baby. I love it. I want even more of these. Keep them coming.
Yeah, well, here in Alberta, we do have municipal elections in a month. So
hey, us too.
Yeah, we do as well. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
When are Quebec's?
It's like November something.
Oh, okay. So you have a bit more time to breathe.
Yeah, a little
We do
more time. Yeah.
in Alberta. Yeah, what a dumb election.
It was dumb, wasn't it?
It was so dumb. I just keep standing there. You know how like that Simpsons episode where Krusty plays worker and parasite, and then at the end he's like, "What the hell was that?"
Yeah.
I've been doing that for like 12 hours.
Yeah, it was very dumb. I don't think any of us learned anything from it. Like we're all a little dumber from it. It was cool to see the NDP
You can
take
count on me.
Edmonton
You're gonna have good
Griesbach
old
from
Rob
that
to
fucking
talk you through all
rat-faced
this.
bitch, Carrie Diot. He is and Blake Desjardins won, and he not only is it sweet to see Carrie Diot, who sued the University of Alberta student newspaper for calling him a racist because he's good buds with Faith Goldie.
I'm sure he's one of these free speech guys too.
Oh
right?
yeah, of course,
yeah.
It's what kind of free speech guy doesn't?
Are you really? Yeah. Are you really a free speech guy if you don't sue someone for like completely stupid fucking reasons? Like my friend Mike. Shout out to my friend Michael Buchert, who.
Oh yes, my friend too.
Yeah,
he knows it better than anyone. But Blake Desjardins seems quite good for the NDP in Edmonton. He's Métis. He is a climate champion. Yeah, I mean, you love to see it. I don't like. Are you guys watching any of the other ridings that? Well, I mean, that isn't one of them, but like there are a few ridings that are still really close. I don't know if you're.
Not really. I'm not plugged into the data. I don't have the data.
Well, Nanaimo Ladysmith was crazy because that was Paul Manley's riding. He's out, but it's really close between the Conservative and New Democrat there. New Democrats ahead by a bit. In Vancouver Granville, because that's one with that house flipper fuck for the Liberals, and good NDP candidate. It's like really close. I think he's up by like 200 votes or something with almost all the polls in. So.
We gotta beat the house flipper. Come on.
Yeah, we got to. In the New Democrat there, her name slips my mind.
Yeah.
Hold on, I am looking up her name.
Okay, I didn't know if you were.
Yeah, Angeli.
Okay.
Angeli Appadurai. She was the candidate who Yara Sachs in York Center like smeared as anti-Semitic this week because she called Israel a colonialist state, which early Zionist leaders also did. So,
It's so dark the way that like any criticism of Israel now that's been the strategy over the last few years to just like take any criticism of Israel and put it into that like bucket, making it basically impossible for anyone to comment on this at all without having these fucked up accusations hurled at them. Like that has a really chilling effect on free speech, right? It's like, why even say anything? You've got no, like when I talk, Michael Buchert is the guy that I talk to the most about this kind of stuff, and that's why he points out why it's such a important litmus test for the left, because there's really no benefit. Like there's no political benefit to standing up for Palestinian human rights. People do it because they believe that it's the right thing to do. But there's almost always like serious consequences that come along with that. So when people do overcome that, it's like you have to really respect it.
It's also very frustrating to me that like the left most viable party where you're the most likely to encounter anything close to Palestinian solidarity in the NDP, it really varies by candidate, and it's not necessarily like the party line. They have a better like their justice in the Middle East platform. Like they have some better foreign policy proposals than say the Liberals or the Conservatives, but they also have a history of being in lockstep on a lot of like peacekeeping missions and foreign policy aggression, and support of states like Israel. And there are some pretty hardcore Zionists in that party too.
Yeah, like Randall Garrison.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy's got to get purged.
I would say that there is a real argument for a general purge of the right wing of the NDP, who have a chokehold on that party, and who I don't think have any interest in governing in a way that would actually appeal to anybody who would potentially vote for the NDP and actually carry that mandate. I think that they're quite happy to be an opposition party that occasionally says nice things and maybe pushes here and there for a few nice policies, but ultimately they don't actually have to be beholden to any left in this country. I don't think they want that. And I think that this election made it very clear that they have very little enthusiasm for that.
Did you see the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute's foreign policy survey they sent out to all the parties? Only the NDP and communists responded to it, and the NDP's answers were very disappointing on like NATO missions, supporting troops in like Latvia. And I mean, just for the election, they were talking about the AUKUS pact.
Oh, God damn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, as Dan Boxes is pointing out in the chat, I mean, that's disqualifying. Like the last week of the election campaign, you have the leader of the NDP going out there and seriously making the argument that like we actually need to enmesh ourselves even more with United States foreign policy. We need to ramp up more tensions with China. We need more new Cold War. Great.
To free the two Michaels. We gotta get our Michaels back.
Our two precious Michaels, folks. We love them.
Yeah, we love them.
We love our two
Michaels.
sweet boys.
Yeah. So they were spies, right? Like
yeah, 100%.
Well, notice, I mean, if they weren't spies, these people like Jagmeet Singh or Aaron O'Toole or Trudeau himself would come out and say specifically, these are two innocent entrepreneurs who have just been snatched up for no reason. Notice how they pointedly avoid saying that, right? No one ever actually says like why these guys were snatched. It's all this like abstract, oh, they just happened to, they avoid all the like the actual details about what they were doing there and why they're in prison in the first place, to say nothing of like the whole, I got into it earlier about the Huawei and the Meng Wanzhou and the Iranian sanctions. Like no one even talks about any of this context. It's just like, the only argument is aren't two Michaels, everybody. Our two sweet boys, we're going to get them. That's all they'd say.
That's what's so frustrating is that if you look at what she actually did, helping Iran bypass sanctions to get like Huawei products into the country. Okay.
The sanctions the sanctions on Iran are illegal.
Yes.
Like, to be clear, like those were completely.
She's in jail for this.
Iran are again. I'll keep saying this. This didn't come up in the debate when we talk about our two sweet precious Michaels, right? Iran negotiated with the United States in good faith to lift these sanctions. They endlessly negotiated this deal, the Iran deal, which they abided by. The United States arbitrarily broke this deal. The United States arbitrarily sanctioned them again for no fucking reason. And then because we're faithful lapdogs of the United States State Department, we do exactly what they say. It has these consequences for our two precious boys. And instead of like responding to the actual reality of like why that has happened, we're like, we need to ratchet up even more tensions with China now as a result. And we have the leader of the fucking NDP making this case. Like, give me a break.
Yeah, so to me, like, that is something that is, call me like a radical extremist, but to me, that's something that I find kind of disqualifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
The leftmost political viable political party in this country, and making an argument in favor of what nuclear winter? Like, what the fuck do you want? What is the
what's the goal? What's the goal here? And I mean, but keep in mind, then NDP is the party that voted to bomb Libya in 2011.
Yeah.
Even the good New Democrats like Nikki Ashton and was Libby Davies still in Parliament then?
I can't remember.
Anyways, the entire party was whipped to support bombing of Libya.
Yeah, and that is what I meant. That is what I mentioned earlier too about Nikki Ashton, because I think since that time she has been like the only one that's taken principled foreign policy stances. And I don't want to make excuses for what was a terrible vote to bomb Libya to be part of that, but I guess I can sort of understand being a young woman who's new to the party and having, you know, the most powerful people in the party being like, we need you to get on board with this. It's not exactly the easiest thing in the world. It's easy to say like, oh, I would say no, and I would tell them to go fuck themselves. But I do sort of understand that that's a difficult position to be put in. But to her credit, since that time, she's been the only one that's taken these kind of principled foreign policy stances. She didn't show up for this China genocide vote. She had this meeting with Corbyn, you know, despite him being kind of a politically toxic figure with these sort of centrist types. So,
oh yeah, that made Tom Mulcair really mad in McLean's.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So mad that he spelled Jeremy Corbyn's name wrong. He was just fuming.
Tom Mulcair is the last fucking person I want to hear from about anything, literally anything.
Yeah.
Like you blew it.
I know.
You blew it.
I started a Substack recently that I'm going to shamelessly plug right now. And
yes, please
my most recent piece was who cares what Tom Mulcair has to say? And,
seriously,
the answer, of course, is the corporate media and the wealthy people behind it who want to constrict the range of political debate in this country. And so Mulcair is like their sensible progressive voice, right? Who attacks the NDP from the right. And a lot of that sour grapes for sure. But
I mean, this guy, he's such a sensible progressive voice that he ran an election campaign and made Justin Trudeau look like fucking Fidel Castro in comparison.
Well, I mean, like father, like son.
Yeah, like father. I wish he did take after his father more, but obviously that just failed to materialize.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even if he took after his supposed father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, more, it would be an improvement in a lot of ways. I mean, PET, did some very bad things, but on foreign policy, we were actually talking about this on Big Shiny Takes, Rob, like on I guess sort of on the margins. PET, he went to China before Nixon did. He supported the government in Cuba. He was I think a stark distinction is he was a huge proponent of nuclear disarmament, whereas Justin votes against it at the UN.
Yeah,
but I think he should be more like his biological father.
Anything would be an improvement. Absolutely. Either the biological father or the adopted father, either or, but he's going in the wrong direction on both of these cases.
I mean, he's taking his foreign policy cues from his deputy prime minister with the Nazi granddad. So
yeah. Well, it's not only that her grandfather is a Nazi, because lots of people had grandparents who were Nazis. It was
she's proud of it.
Yeah.
How
that she openly talks about it. And it's like he's great.
Yeah, she was like he tried to bring democracy to Ukraine. He was a great man. And then when people ask her about her Nazi granddad, her obfuscations are what is so troubling. Like she
Russian propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. She can't just bring herself to be like, he collaborated with the Nazis, and that was bad. Like she can't say those words, and I find that interesting.
Yeah, well, it's like you can't say those words when we're continually funding like Azov Battalion and we have fucking monuments to the Galician SS division throughout the country.
Yep. And like to me, that it says everything it needs to say. She doesn't have to say a word. She doesn't have to come out and say, "Yeah, no, my granddad was a Nazi and I'm a Nazi too." Like, yeah, we know.
Yeah,
we can tell.
Yeah. Well, what do you think's going to happen with Trudeau? Like, obviously he won, didn't get what he wanted, but do you think he's going to run in another election, or do you think he's going to sort of throw Freeland to the wolves? Like, I guess it probably depends on how the party's doing in the polls, but what do you guys think?
What do you think, Pedrino?
From what I've heard from people I know, I've heard that Trudeau's kind of done with politics. He wants to go camping. He wants to spend time with his kids. So I've heard that Trudeau's kind of done. He's kind of bored of being a politician. He never really wanted to do this, apparently, from like a personal standpoint. So I think he's done. I think it depends when the next election is. If it's under 18 months, maybe he'll run again. But if it's more than 2 years, I've heard that he's definitely just going to leave it to an interim leader and then throw the garbage can to whoever.
Yeah, I mean, he'll have been prime minister for 8 years, which is like, as long as Brian Mulroney was, and not as long as Jean Chrétien, a bit shorter than Harper, but like it's 2 terms, right? In the US parlance, that is always seeping into our politics. But but like Freeland's clearly like the heir apparent, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Like she'll be the next Liberal leader,
the woke girl boss PM.
She is our Kamala.
And if we criticize in the election campaign, if we criticize it, it's going to be like, oh, you're the bros.
Yeah.
The leftist bros are at it again, doing sexism on the timeline. When we're like, I don't think it's good to have someone who praises her Nazi grandfather. They're gonna be like, it's sexist to say that.
Oh,
and people will believe it.
It's gonna be the line 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like, sorry, Lana.
Oh, it's just I think that they're clearly going to push her. They're going to use the classic sexism line. Who the hell knows if that's even going to work? And I find it like they do probably need to change the leadership. I almost suspected like there's a part of tinfoil hat part of me that was like, did he just call this election because he doesn't want the job anymore and he's like throwing it because he ran such a bad campaign where he was like melting down half the time.
Yeah.
But I was like, is he just like trying to lose?
Well, I still believe the basic idea that they thought they were going to get a majority. That like we came out of this pandemic, we're doing mostly okay, especially comparison to the States. These conservative premiers like Jason Kenney have completely fucked it up, Doug Ford and everyone else. Yep. People are sick of them. They're going to reward us with the majority. Like I do kind of accept the basic premise that they thought it was just an easy way to expand the power base and not have to deal with these other parties, but I do get the idea as well that like he's probably keeping his eye on the door also.
Yeah, like it was a very weird campaign the entire time. It just sort of felt rudderless and reactive a lot of the time. And it was, I kind of want to get into the PPC a little bit because I feel like the way that they're being used by the media is as almost like a boogeyman for the Liberals. We're going to get ranked choice voting. We can't do preferential voting because of the PPC. We can't like you're going to have to vote for Chrystia Freeland because you don't want to give your vote over to a fringe party like the PPC. You know what I mean? So, and that's worrisome to me too, because if you look at the numbers now, like Trudeau, I mean, yeah, the way that our stupid fucked up system works, like they got their minority government, but he lost the popular vote to O'Toole by a hair.
He has no legitimacy. He has zero legitimacy. It's amazing. Like I was saying earlier,
people are angry.
Yeah.
Like they're very pissed off with him.
And another thing you're pointing out, Lana, the way that the PPC is going to be used as a boogeyman is going to be the same thing if we start trying to bang the drum about electoral reform again and we want proportional representation. They're saying, oh, you're just going to empower these dangerous extremists
to talk you through all this.
And then there's a real question of like they kind of coalesced almost out of nowhere, and where are they getting their money and why are they getting so much airtime compared to other parties that have fewer candidates running, but the platform is, say, like the Communist Party, like the platform actually much better reflects what a lot of people want compared with the NDP. They get just as many seats as the PPC, and they don't get interviewed anywhere. They're never on TV. They don't get invited to debates.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the thing.
A narrative. There is a very clear media narrative around like who gets to have a voice in this country.
I think one issue with the communists is they have so few candidates, right? Yeah. Like if they ran a full slate, I do think they would have to be getting more attention. And
they just don't. It's a matter of like not having the resources, right? Too, as well. Yeah. It's like they got kind of surprised by this election. It's like there's only so much they can do.
Which, frankly, I do think is kind of by design, that they're excluded from being able to access those resources in the way that something like the PPC obviously is not. They're getting it. They
Yeah.
have almost a full slate. They have the resources. They have the money. They have the national presence.
It becomes like a feedback loop with the media too, because we talk about the Communist Party and how they're marginalized and like they don't have the support. We all live in a Twitter bubble and we think that they have more support than they do. But also it's like a cause and effect thing. Like if they did get covered in the media more people would know about their platform. They would get more support. It's like you have to talk about them if like they want to be treated seriously like that. But they don't, like the PPC is a fringe party and they still get talked about. And that's part of the reason they're rising in the polls is because you have these journalists like falling over themselves to make sure they have a platform and more people know that they're out there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and the you know, they're really going for the semen retention vote.
Which I support. I mean, that's one thing that we should be coalescing around.
Obviously, the PPC is Maxime Bernier's own Vandy project, but when he lost last night, you know, it occurred to me, I was like, is there going to be a leadership race?
Yeah,
because that would be
that guy.
Yeah, like I feel like he's got to be the front runner at this point.
He's the most psychically powerful guy they have. Obviously.
Yeah, very powerful energy. But yeah, no, that would be like that it's one of those things where like you wouldn't be able to look away from it. You know that like giving a PPC leadership race attention isn't the right thing to do, but it would be so entertaining, you know?
Yeah.
What do you think O'Toole's gonna hang on?
I'm sure the knives are getting sharpened in the back room of the Conservative Party. I mean, he still has a case to stay on, though. I mean, it's like a lot of people expected Trudeau to walk away with a majority in this. They still outperform. They're getting a higher share of the popular vote than Justin Trudeau is. He can make that case to people, but they're also losing seats in places like Alberta. But also, you can point to Jason Kenney for the reason for why that's happening. Not so much Aaron O'Toole.
Yeah. And there's only 2 seats they lost in Alberta, right? Calgary Skyview went Liberal. They poached a fairly popular city councillor to run for the Liberals there. And then Edmonton Griesbach. In Edmonton, Strathcona had already been New Democrat they've been NDP since like 2008. But so it's not like Jason Kenney is a huge liability for the Conservative Party of Canada.
What's going to go on in Alberta, Jeremy? Like, when are those, like, isn't it not till 2022 that like you can actually maybe choose a new government in Alberta?
2023. We're only halfway through Kenney's term, and it feels like an eternity because COVID and everything. There's actually a piece in the Calgary Herald that dropped last night from Don Braid, who's like a center right columnist. He's sort of a mixed bag, but he was saying his sources in the UCP are saying that they're trying to get Kenney to resign like ASAP. I don't buy it. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. I think Don Braid's sources are just like fucking with him.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing too. You got to wonder if that's going to reverberate, if they might end up losing their grip on power. But there's a lot of time for them to spin and wriggle their way out of trouble, right?
Oh yeah, I still think they're going to win 2023 because the Alberta NDP is so like rudderless.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this too. It's just like there would be an opportunity for the NDP to take power because of all the legitimate reasons that they've completely fucked up in this pandemic, but the NDP would have to be good in that case. And that's a problem, I guess, for the Alberta NDP.
The Alberta NDP are
going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
It's very much
Sack
like
the war
Democrats and
room.
Republicans here. And so, like Democrats, they're either going to, dissatisfaction will be so great with Kenney that the NDP will like slip in, or they'll fuck it up somehow.
Yeah. Or they'll slip in, not do what has to be done, and then give the party back to some other raving psycho in a couple years.
Yeah, which is what happened from 2015 to 2019.
Yeah.
Like, there are very few things you can point to that the Alberta NDP did that are still intact. Like
Yeah.
raising the minimum wage to $15, like that's something they did that the UCP haven't rolled back, although they did create like a 2-tiered wage for like servers. But even then, like $15 an hour is not a lot now in its own right. And yeah, I can't really think of anything else they did that the UCP haven't easily rolled back, right? Because there's all like incremental, means tested, half measures.
And when they were passing all these things, you had activists in the NDP just like pleading with them, like, please, please just go big. You don't know when you're going to have this power again. You have the power to go big and do a big transformative change here. People want it. Obviously, that's why they voted them in. You can do a just transition. You can move away from this like pipeline politics. And they scolded the activists at every turn. It's like, no, we know how things are done. We know how political power works. This is how the game is played. And then they just get fucking completely wiped out. And all these incremental things that they tried to pass get erased. And somehow the same power structure is still in power, still making the same arguments. It's like,
that's my
great.
issue, is that it's the timidity and the opportunism at every level of the party. Whether we're talking, even in my own riding, where I mentioned we have an NDP MP and he's a landlord, and there is a pretty serious housing crisis in the city now. And specifically in my area, like in the collection of boroughs that I live in, there's a lot of very aggressive, very predatory property speculation happening that's creating a massive eviction crisis. At the same time, and I'm supposed to feel protective of this guy because he's NDP. Well, he's presiding over this.
Is that Bouleries?
Yeah, and that's enraging to me.
Yeah.
To see this happen. I mean, people are literally dying. That's not an exaggeration. People are dying because of this.
Yeah.
In BC, you have Horgan basically being a lumber baron and cutting down these old growth forests, which, you know, again, that during an ecological disaster, that is enraging. Again, this is the leftmost party that's supposed to care about the environment, and they're cutting down these centuries-old trees that are older
and
than
having
any
the
of us.
RCMP go in and violently bust up these blockades.
Yeah,
and it's like we're supposed to believe that they're going to do the right thing when it comes to like the TRC or indigenous communities. Why would we believe that?
With Jeremy, all the stuff Jeremy mentioned about Alberta, we don't have to go over again. Or even at the federal level where, you know, it's like even when they do propose something like dental care or pharmacare, it's never universal. It's always means tested bullshit that nobody wants, and it's always accompanied by some incredibly weird saber rattling that they don't need to do about Syria or Libya or China or whatever, because they want to get that liberal vote. They are, unfortunately, like, yes, I would love to have them be a bulwark against like neoliberalism in Canada, but they're not. They are a heat sink for radical politics and actually pursuing a very neoliberal line in a lot of ways that is a little bit more, maybe a little bit more progressive than anybody else who's viable, but not by much. And it makes them irrelevant. Like, it's not what the people who would vote for them, this is not what we want. And it just seems very clear that that's not who they're listening to. They're not listening to, you know, their would-be constituents. They're listening to somebody else, and they're not taking it seriously. And it just makes me think you guys don't want to govern.
Well, and I think a perfect example of that is the NDP calling for the abolition of interest on student loans.
Great.
Like,
Thank you.
Yeah, like, how are you not calling for free post-secondary? Like, in the age of Bernie Sanders, like, how, like if you look at the Communist Party platform, you know, it's a really good platform. You know, I probably would vote communist if there was a candidate in my riding, but it's all like solid social. It's a solid social democratic platform, right? It's not particularly.
It's not even like let's form a vanguard party and storm parliament and take it. It's none of that. It's literally just like some very like sensible common sense.
It's all things that should. It's all things that the NDP, it should be the NDP platform, but there too, I think part of it is they're still in this hangover from like the Jack Layton, Tom Mulcair era, where it's like, okay, if we run, like, okay, Mulcair tried running slightly to the right of Liberals. didn't work. What if we tried to run slightly to the left of the liberals
and made some TikToks as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's just not.
Oh yeah, now we're cooking with gas, baby.
Can we talk about that Amy McPherson post about that Jagmeet TikTok where he's
about how he was like, "This is violence. He's promoting violence.
He's promoting murder and suicide by listening to Dido in the shower."
That.
Yeah.
This is one of those moments where I was like, I'm disassociating. It's like we're dealing with so many fucking serious crises. I keep saying this. I feel like I'm a broken record, but like, we're dealing with so many real serious issues that people are really angry about. We're all getting left behind. Our planet's on fire. And this is what our discourse is in the final week of the election. You have Jagmeet saying like, please vote in the shower in a TikTok. And liberals being like, this is disgusting behavior. He's advocating for murder, suicide. And this is what our discourse is. These are the things we're supposed to be concerned about. I'm like, what are we doing here, folks? This is not good. This is not the sign of a healthy society. This is a sick society.
So like lame. Like they're losers. They're wieners.
Yeah, the NDP is addicted to losing, as my big shiny my big shiny co-host Eric Wickham is fond of saying. Like they just can't help themselves.
Yeah, and it's kind of like similar to what you're saying, Jeremy. It's like I don't want to discount the fact that there's a number of people that were running last night that are great. There's a number of really cool MPs in the NDP. There's a lot of great activists. I don't want to discount that. We complain about the NDP all the time. I don't want to discount the fact that there's a lot of really cool people that do get all this stuff. This is the issue that we always run into, though, is that like as long as their leadership is in place of these there's these Blairites that are still in 2022, they're still wedded to this idea of this kind of like benign progressive neoliberalism. And they're the ones pulling all the strings in the party. You know, it's not just Jagmeet, it's the whole leadership structure around the party. It doesn't really matter all that much, like what candidates are there. Like there's a lot of great candidates, but ultimately the party has to decide to like actually meaningfully change the way it's doing things. And they have no sign that they're going to be doing that anytime soon. Like Jagmeet, I think to me, like Jagmeet, there's a good case that Jagmeet should step down as the leader. Like, I don't know how he has credibility as the leader of the NDP. It's been a failure. The whole last 5 years of his tenure has been a fucking failure. And they still just don't show any signs of like moving on from this. It's like, no, we're just going to keep doing we're going to keep doing this strategy, which obviously very clearly is not working or not helping anybody.
Well, I think Jagmeet is sort of a blank canvas for the New Democrats, right? He was the legislator in Ontario. I'm from the GTA, and I liked him a lot as like the deputy leader of the Ontario NDP.
He seems like a cool guy.
He would have been a better leader than Andrea Horwath, but yeah, I mean, what does Jagmeet Singh stand for, right? Like we don't know, but it's also I find them often online defending Jagmeet more than I would like to, because I do think that the venom that liberal supporters have for him in always talking about how the party's lost its way, that Jack Layton would never do this. I mean, it's clearly rooted in white supremacy, that there's this scary brown man who
for sure,
encouraging murder and suicide on TikTok.
So that's like really frustrating, because like my issue with Jagmeet is like he's nice enough, he's just really like anodyne and doesn't have like the kind of like fire to be a leader of a left party, like during a massive economic and environmental catastrophe that we kind of need. Like he doesn't have like a bold, clear vision of what he wants, and he kind of just toes the line on the party. And that's really like my issue with him. But there is like a very serious racist tendency in this country that's embraced across the political spectrum. And you see like liberals, like, coexist, Black Lives Matter liberals, like Black Lives Matter in the bio, like engaging in this kind of shit.
My favorite are the liberals with Palestine flag emojis in their names.
They see the Palestinians, they hear them, and that's all.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's the extent to which
they're not going to do anything about it.
No, of course not. Of course not. We got Jesse Hawken joined. Jesse Hawken has answered the Rob signal as well. Yeah, he's connecting to the call.
The Rob signal is just your mustache.
Yes.
Like it's like the bat signal.
That's right. That's correct. Yeah. No, but I do think it's an important point because we talk about like how we want Jugmeat to be angrier. There is it is true that like if he did take this kind of like angry, fiery class war rhetoric, there would be a lot of that kind of reaction, right? Scary brown man angrily shouting and stuff. But at the same time, he can't allow his own positions to be shaped by this kind of like racist reactionary backlash that he's going to get. Like if there's enough reason for people to be angry, if he wants to motivate people, he has to like speak to that. And if he can't do it for whatever reason, he's got to like step aside for someone who can.
And there's also a very real possibility that the party just wouldn't let him.
That seems to be the issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even an issue of Jugmeat. It's an issue of the party whip and the party leadership and the right wing of that, the Mulcaris of that party who have such control over it.
Yeah.
And look at what happens to a candidate like Nikki Ashton. They decide they don't like her because she, takes this particular stance on, I don't know, Palestine or whatever. And they reprimand her for going to Greece, right? It's like they're looking for a reason to punish and suppress anybody who steps out of that box. So.
Yeah, and she was the one out there making the cases that we need to nationalize all these industries. We need public ownership of the telecons and stuff. And then they bench her for these arbitrary reasons.
Yeah, in Jugmeat's rhetoric is so couched, right? It's like we're gonna tax the super wealthy,
the ultra wealthy,
ultra wealthy, right? And it's like,
great,
just tax the wealthy, that's not like, and they're trying to appeal to like, I think upper middle class, like suburbanites, but they're not gonna vote for you. Like I grew up around these people.
Yeah, no, never, not in a million years.
Yeah, they'll vote liberal, on a good day.
Yeah,
but the NDP is just seen as beyond the pale, and if you're going to be seen as beyond the pale by these people anyways, then be beyond the pale for them. They're not your friends, they're not your comrades.
I just want to take the moment to welcome Jesse Hawken to the panel.
Hey Jesse,
nice to be here. Thank you for allowing me to sneak in at the last minute.
Yeah, I'm glad you could make it, Jesse, for the last couple of minutes. Where are you at? I know you've got a rant ready to unleash here. What's your takeaway? What's your takeaway from last night?
My takeaway from last night is that people are talking about how this was a $600 million waste of time, this election, but I think that it served an important purpose in the sense that the fact that they dropped the election forced all these provincial premiers that were playing politics with things like the vaccine passport and everything to give it up and to start the wheels turning so that this didn't become costly for their careers, so that they couldn't be blamed for Trudeau being reelected. Like it caught them all on the defensive and it started the wheels turning on these things that should have already happened. So I think that there was one good thing about this election, which is that it pushed everything to a point where it had to either go or become a problem for the futures of politicians in this country.
It was funny how they waited till the last minute pretty much to start advancing some of these public safety measures.
And I thought it was fantastic that Jason Kenney and Aaron O'Toole obviously had a plan to keep the vaccine passport sort of admission of defeat under wraps until after the election. But reality intervened.
Yeah.
They could not, the fact that he had to finally come forward and announce that the province was going into a lockdown murdered Aaron O'Toole's chances of being elected prime minister.
And the vaccine passport is fucking disaster here. It was, oh, this is great. It's so quick and efficient, and you don't have to wait on the shitty Alberta Health website for an hour to get to it. But then people pointed out that the PDFs they send you can be edited,
of course.
And in Derek Fildebrandt, I don't know if you guys remember him. He was the sort of bad boy of the Wild Rose Party. Yeah. He's a freaky libertarian. He just posted a blank vaccine passport. He's like, oh, hey, look, a blank vaccine passport. And I mean, I think it's obviously, like, I thought at first, like I tweeted out, like, if I may be a bit conspiratorial, I think they did that on purpose to like not upset the anti-vaxxers who are a portion of the UCP base. But then all the replies were like, what do you mean that's not conspiratorial? Of course that's what they do.
Yeah.
And,
but they're not even calling it a vaccine passport, isn't it? Like a freedom, it's like a freedom pass or like something like
no. It's so
like that?
So they,
it's
not
restriction exemption system or something like
that.
Yeah.
They're placing the onus on businesses to sign up. So basically, they announced these new restrictions, like no indoor dining and capacity limits and all that. But if you sign up for this exemption system, where you require proof of vaccination, those restrictions get waived. So it's not a vaccine passport, it's a restriction exemption program.
So they're still kind of trying to keep that like personal freedom framing though, right? Kind of like it's all about choice. It's all about personal choice and stuff like that. They're trying to maintain this.
Yeah, because of course they are.
Yeah.
To me, it's you're not denying anybody their rights if you're charging $50 to get into a play and somebody says, well, I don't have $50. It's like, I feel that this system of that you have to prove that you're allowed to be somewhere is not a violation of freedom at all.
Yeah. And I think we should let people into plays that don't have $50. But if we're going to take that seriously, that idea of personal freedom, then let's have that discussion and not just base it around fucking vaccines. I
don't know if you've covered this to death in the show so far, but the other victory from last night was the PPC forcing the conservatives to eat shit. Yeah,
that was. Well, did they really impact, like, were there ridings?
They're starting
really
to crunch the numbers and realize that at least last night on the CBC, they said that at least 9 ridings in Ontario, the Conservatives lost by fewer votes than the PPC candidate got.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, I do
what a
think,
damn tragedy.
Like something for the vaccine passports, like for people who do have some kind of weird hang up about it, I think a real way that, like, say a left platform could address people's concerns about freedom or whatever, wouldn't be to say, abolish the passports. I think it would be to say, okay, well, yeah, we do have an issue in this country of, say, there are a lot of homeless people, for example, who have not been able to get vaccinated. There have been huge wait times in a lot of boroughs that have made it really difficult for people to get time off or schedule an appointment. So
there's like indigenous and racialized people that are not comfortable with the government giving them shots, for
there are
justifiable reasons.
There are migrants in this country who are terrified of going to a clinic because they're afraid they're going to get deported. So like you could address it in that way where it says, you're not going to face any penalization, and we're going to, have more pop-up clinics and make it as publicly available as possible with lots of information about how you can get it. And even if you are a migrant and you don't have citizenship, nobody's going to send you away. Like, there's nothing as bad good as is going to happen to you, and you're going to get that passport and it's going to be free. Don't worry about it. That would be a way of addressing any concerns people have.
And to have people communicate that in other languages as well.
Yep.
Like whenever they were doing this sort of like, let's, Canadians, we asked Ryan Reynolds to tell people to sort of get their shot. And it's like, why are you only thinking about like Hollywood and famous people? Like there are people who are famous in this country who don't speak English, and their fans aren't, it's not an English audience. So why are you not like forefronting that if you're really trying to reach out?
You should get Bonham to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hey, but I'm wondering
Ding A Dong to both do a vaccine ad.
But from your perspective, how has the vaccine passport system in Ontario unfolded? Like, has it been as disastrous as it's been in Alberta, or has it been mostly as it worked, or what's going on?
I think it's just starting. I think it starts tomorrow, actually. So I don't think it's fully implemented yet. It's okay. It sounds better than Alberta's system, but Ford was really reluctant to do it, but eventually enough pressure happened. There's been a big push, I think, from people who in their jobs are required to get vaccinated, like nurses. It's been a lot of those people like just quitting. But I find it ironic though, because that there's vaccine passports, but these vaccine mandates for certain employers like nurses and stuff. It's ironic because I know someone who's going to be a early childcare educator, and they have to have a whole sheet of like 15 different vaccines to work with kids for like a student placement. And it's so ironic how before that wasn't really political. There was a few people who would resist against that, but that wasn't that political. And then now the COVID vaccine for like nurses, there's been a big thing with like nurses, certain healthcare workers, where Ford did kind of make it mandatory, and certain workplaces have individually decided to make it mandatory. And there's been a big resistance against that from like PPC type nurses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of why I think that doing this mandate in a way that addresses whatever, like, because there's a big difference between unvaccinated and anti-vax, and the anti-vax population accounts for a relative minority of people who have some kind of hesitancy or are unvaccinated for whatever reason, whether it's for personal medical reasons or lack of access or whatever. And so like that would just be, it wouldn't convince any of those guys, obviously, because they're all huffing horse paste and what have you, but it would at least marginalize them even more. It would minimize the influence that they have, I think.
Yeah, like Victorious Zotby in the chat, he's big into they're big into the horse paste phenomenon. It's another thing I wanted to point out as well. It's just absolutely wilding out in the chat. It's some really crazy stuff getting posted there. Another thing that I wanted to point out, because someone mentioned how the far right has been able to organize around this anti-vax stuff in this election because of the pandemic, and they're saying, well, eventually the pandemic's going to kind of recede, so maybe that energy is going to recede. But that's one thing I really don't agree with. Like, they're organizing that around now because that's the big issue in the far right now. But this whole far right movement we have at the moment is not going anywhere. It's not going to dissipate. All as we progress further into these crises. The climate crisis, the housing crisis, which ultimately what we're talking about is a crisis of capitalism. It's a failure of capitalism. It's a failure of our institutions. These far-right movements are just going to continue to grow. And whether or not it's based around this vaccine stuff, as it was been in this election, they're going to find the next thing. They're going to find the next right-wing conspiracy that they can organize around. Like, that's not going to stop. It might shift. It might shift and take different form, but it's definitely not going anywhere.
Oh yeah, like all these Wexit freaks here in Alberta are now just anti-mask, anti-vax guys. They just go from, before they were like the yellow vesters, and they just go from grift to grift, like the main players,
they're just opportunists.
Like this Glenn Carrot guy, and I believe he's running for mayor of Innisfil, not Innisfil, Ontario, Innisfil, Alberta. And he was like a city councillor, and this guy, from yellow vest to Wexit to anti-mask, but it's all white supremacy, right? Like that's like you take the mask, right? Like Scooby-Doo, like take the mask off, and it's just it's fascism.
Yeah, I mean it's white supremacy and it's class war, and the two always have to go together. And if you look at the actual, I remember, I don't want to reveal too much about myself, but I remember facing off with people like this before they had coalesced into like QAnon type parties, when, in Quebec, when they were sort of using nationalist Quebec front parties to sort of shield themselves. But their heavy muscle, like the people who would always back them up at demonstrations, were always far right groups. It was always neo-Nazis. Yeah. It was always groups like La Meute, who have since kind of broken up, and Atalante, and like Pegida, and like these very, very scary far right neo-Nazi groups. And I would see them there at demonstrations, chatting with cops and shaking their hands, while they kind of tag teamed and went to town on us.
Yeah. And now all these cops are doing the wink and nod to the anti-vax types, anti-mask types, because they all agree with that shit as well.
Guys. They're all the same guys.
Yeah.
Like they're all friends. But what I noticed a lot was when, say, they would kind of like they would do this thing where they would like show up to the border at Roxham Road. They would say it was like to protest like Trudeau's like border, like they seem to have this idea that he was like an open borders guy. And that they were protesting his like immigration policies. But
Yeah,
what they
because
were
you got to import all the refugees and migrants so you can dilute the white race. So, like, that's ultimately the goal, and that's what Trudeau's trying to do, and I support that, frankly.
Yeah, of course. So basically, Roxham Road is just this like, it's very close to the border with the States, and it's this like big transitory point where a lot of migrants pass through. And you can actually see like migrant tents and like border patrol hangs out there a lot, and they have these sort of encampments there. And so that's where they tend to come through, and that's where a lot of them get sent back. And what these people, this is what they would spend their weekends doing, is they would go up there just to hassle the world's poorest people who are coming through trying to seek a little bit of stability, coming up through the States. But they're usually coming from places like Haiti, for example.
Which we have helped destabilize economically and socially, and we've created all the fucking chaos that they're then fleeing from, right?
Yeah. Right, and so they would come up into the States, and then they would try to pass through into Canada. But because Canada and the United States have an agreement where America is like considered to be like a safe country, they would often get sent back to the States because they had no legal permission to enter as refugees from the United States because of this agreement. And this is what these people would do, is they would come up to this border where people were trying very desperately to save themselves, and they would just hassle them and just be monsters to them. And they would always come up with gas-guzzling SUVs, and they would be driving in from, so you could tell they were wealthy. A lot of these people were middle class to upper middle class, and overwhelming majority were white. And they would come in from like places like RDP, like small towns and boroughs that were known for being really wealthy, where a lot of McMansions are. And like, this is what they would spend their time doing, is just bullying the easiest targets they could find. And so like, that's kind of what I learned firsthand from that experience, was that like, these people are representative of a very small, sort of semi-feudal class of people who exist in this country. There is a lot of them, but do they represent the masses of working people? They actually really don't, but they're really good at speaking to sort of vague, general kind of phrases of like freedom and democracy. And like, so they're really good at using that rhetoric and co-opting legitimate grievances that people have. But it's all this sort of like fantasy mythology that they've made up where they're the oppressed ones, and it's everybody else. It's the secret immigrant, Jew, gay, liberal who is oppressing them, that they are the actual, like they're the actual producer of the country. They're the ones who actually generate wealth. And a lot of these people are business owners, keep that in mind. Yes. So they have this impression that like having to do something like follow or impose a mask mandate in their workplace is unbearable tyranny. Like anybody telling them how to run their business is tyranny. So that's the mindset that you're dealing with there.
So we just got a couple more minutes, gang. I really appreciate you could answer the Rob signal and join the stream. Jesse, I know you probably have some more thoughts. You came here for a cameo at the end. You want to leave us with something here?
Well, on the spot, I think that, it's been funny. I've been watching all the rationalizations that have been going on the right-wing media about what they have to admit was a failure.
Yeah. According to O'Toole's speech, it was a great victory, apparently. We watched the speech. It was like he was acting like he was won. He won.
Yeah, he acted like he won. But then there were all these little hints, like he told Trudeau, he said, well, I had a phone call with the prime minister and I advised him that if he threatens another election in the next 18 months, the Conservative Party will be ready. And I'm like, you use the word threaten in a phone call to the prime minister to congratulate him?
Yeah.
like not mad, actually laughing kind of response. Exactly. And it was like, well, mission accomplished. We kept Trudeau to a minority. We knew we weren't going to win this election. And it was like, are you out of your minds? This was an incredibly winnable election.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for a while there, it was looking like you might actually even do it. This has to be considered a defeat. And when the groups like Canada Proud are like, it's time to get rid of this clown and get a real man in office, it's like, this is the third time that you've been beaten by a clown.
Well,
like,
what does that say about you?
Stop with the argument that this guy's You know, like I don't like Trudeau either, but I hate you guys even more because you never, I mean, I'm glad that there's a movement to keep Aaron O'Toole around for one more round because I'd love to see him eat shit one more time. I actually don't think Trudeau's going to run again.
Okay, so we were talking about this earlier. So you think Trudeau's done after this?
Yes. I don't know who's next, but I think he must realize now that he has a ceiling. He'll never crack it.
Well, he must realize that, like, obviously we've talked about the comparisons with Obama and everything, but he must realize that his image has been kind of tarnished, and it's becoming each election cycle is becoming increasingly difficult to convince people that, like, he has these progressive ideals in mind. All the fucking weird shit from his past keeps coming up, the blackface stuff.
Yeah.
Every single time it's got diminishing returns, so he's got to realize that by now.
Yeah,
you know,
can't
yesterday
go back to 2015.
No. We would all love to go back to 2015, but it's not going to happen.
Can I just say quickly, one more thing that I was having fun last night on Twitter was that people were sharing the blackface photo.
Truly a
Because there's
demonic
another
image. That, like, I don't want to
It is.
undersell. It's really
In color
upsetting
now.
to look at.
He
Yeah, it's really
loves
bad.
doing that.
He loves
He really
blackface,
loves
this guy.
He loves it.
But the people that share the photo love it even more. They're not like they're using it
Oh, sure.
in a really
yeah.
destructive way. Like a friend of mine, a black friend of mine, said that he finds it really triggering. He finds the sharing of that photo by the right wing people to be even more disturbing than the actual photo.
They're a little too enthusiastic. They're
Oh,
not doing
yeah.
it because they care about the feelings of racialized people. They're just
So,
Yeah,
gleefully
like you can date this conservative concern over blackface right to like 2 years ago when
Yeah, exactly.
the photos of Trudeau came. Then suddenly like blackface is bad to them. Like weren't they constantly defending it?
Or Megyn
Prior.
Kelly in the States, like she got fired from her NBC show because she said, well, I didn't know that blackface was racist until I was 47 years old. You know,
Yeah.
they play these games. But anyway, so the way that I found this magical way to torture these shit posters on Twitter is when they were sharing the photo, I said, can you stop sharing racist imagery, please? Like, don't you have any like black people in your life that don't want to have to see this shit all the time? Stop sharing racist photos.
And then they just go into brain
They went into
shutdown mode.
complete meltdown. Just
Yeah.
got so mad at me
I
because
find it
they are. It's racist to be sharing those photos, I think.
I do find it very ironic. Like I did see those images going around and a number of like Tory partisans saying, oh, we have to get O'Toole in there to stop this racist government.
Mhm.
What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You're going to get, let me read that again. You're going to elect the Tories to stop racism.
Yeah. I'm sure
Yeah.
O'Toole's going to get right on, like, fixing our prison system so that the overwhelming, like, misrepresentation of racialized people and indigenous people in our prison system. He's going to address these issues, right? He's going to get right on that.
Yeah. He'll definitely put some non-white men in his cabinet.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, well, I feel like that's all the time we have for today, folks. I got to go pick up my kid at kindergarten soon. Thank you so much to my wonderful panelists, though, Budgerino, Jeremy Appel, Jesse, and Lana. It was a pleasure to hear from you all on this. I don't know if did we learn anything? I don't know if we did.
No,
I don't know. We're not better off,
Not
really.
a single thing.
I
No.
learned that, in short, Canada is a land of contrasts.
It's true. It is a land of contrasts. Fuck. Okay, well, again, thanks. I appreciate everyone. You guys could take some time to chat about this stuff. And I'm now going to take a little break from talking about this stupid election for a few days. It's been 5 straight days for me talking about this now, and I'm tired of it.
yeah, you deserve it.
Yeah.
Like a break, not
you
to,
you worked really hard.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks a lot, everyone. It was a pleasure to hear from you. I'll talk to you soon.
yeah.
Thank
great
you.
to be here.
Thanks for having me.